Number 10. Who's salty? On a Spirit Airlines flight on March 27, 2019, an intoxicated woman threw a fit, argued with a flight attendant, and then showed her goodies off to the passengers. It all started with her talking to a flight attendant. We're not sure what exactly they were talking about, but the conversation quickly got heated. The woman began screaming very loudly and was shouting obscenities at the stewardess. What happened next was an unhinged rant of biblical proportions. As the drunk woman stood in the middle of the aisle, she kept screaming and ranting about things that really didn't make any sense. One of the things she kept repeating was the phrase, "Who's salty?" As she was doing this, multiple passengers had their phones out recording her. When she realized she had at least a dozen phones pointed at her, she bent over, lifted her dress, and showed everyone her butt. As if showing her bare bottom to a group of strangers on an airplane wasn't enough, she then went on to twerk in front of everyone. She thought she was the star of her own personal show. Everyone on board got front row seats to a super strange and unwanted burlesque show. When she was done, she took her belongings from the overhead compartment and marched off the plane while everyone clapped. Number 9. Playboy model gets kicked off flight. Eve J. Marie, a Playboy model, was kicked off a Southwest Airlines flight with her 7-year-old son in October 2020. She just boarded her flight from Dallas to Tulsa. Moments after she got on the plane, flight attendants asked her and her son to leave immediately. But why? Apparently, Eve was wearing a top that airline employees felt was too revealing. Yes, in this day and age, a woman and her child were kicked off a plane because the airport officials didn't like her outfit. The Instagram influencer and Playboy model had a low-cut leopard print top that showed off quite a bit of cleavage. According to the crew, it was a bit too much cleavage and went against their dress code policy. Eve was humiliated, embarrassed, and extremely offended as she walked off the plane with her kid. Eve didn't go down without a battle, though. When she confronted employees at the airport, she demanded to know what exactly their policy entails, but they couldn't agree on anything. What it really came down to was that her chest was too large, her shirt was too small, and it simply made some people uncomfortable. In the end, she was allowed back on the flight, provided she covered her chest with a blanket. Number 8. Duct tape to her seat. In July of 2021, an unnamed woman spent most of her trip from Dallas-Fort Worth to Charlotte duct taped to her seat. According to the airline, she attacked the flight attendants and then tried to open the front door of the plane. What the heck? It was a pretty unusual outburst, and it started about 1.5 hours into the flight, where most people on board had no idea that it was actually happening. The attendants were running up and down the aisles, whispering to one another, locking bathroom doors, and acting very suspicious. They wouldn't say what was going on, but it was clear that there was some kind of distress. It appeared like they were in the midst of some secret chaos. Unbeknownst to most of the passengers, a lady had gotten up, exclaimed that she needed to get off the plane, and started banging on the exit door. When the attendants tried to subdue her, she used her mouth as a weapon and started biting them. They had no other choice but to duct tape her to her seat. We aren't sure what motivated this woman to try opening a door mid-flight, but when the plane landed, she was taken into custody by police, and that's the last we heard. Number 7. Snakes on a plane. This time, the unruly passenger isn't a human, but a snake. An AirAsia plane was forced to make an unscheduled landing in early 2022 because a snake was moving through the overhead lights. Passengers could see its silhouette shining through the cabin's light casings like some evil shadow making its way towards the cockpit. These kinds of incidents don't happen often. Somehow, the snake got on board the flight before they left the capital of Kuala Lumpur on the route to Tawau on the Borneo Islands. As soon as the pilot realized the snake was bothering the passengers and slithering through the lights, he took the appropriate actions. He landed 560 miles or just over 900 kilometers short of the destination so that the plane could be fumigated. Why would you fumigate the plane? Well, no one knew what kind of snake it was. All they could see was a black outline of its body. And this is Malaysia we're talking about, where there are numerous species of extremely venomous serpents. It was a big risk to the people on board, even though the chief safety officer for AirAsia, Long Tien Ling, said no time was the crew at risk. However, if the snake had proved to be venomous and it fell onto somebody's lap, this would be a very different story. What would you do if you saw a snake on your flight? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. Number 6. Delta Karen. In December 2021, Patricia Cornwall was arrested for slapping a passenger across the face on a Delta flight. She has since been dubbed the Delta Karen. Like many ridiculous Karen incidents, the whole outburst was captured on video, but this wasn't the first time Cornwall had gotten in trouble. She was also arrested on a separate occasion for trying to fight a police officer in Florida following a DUI. Let's talk about the DUI first. Patricia crashed her car on November 10th in Santa Rosa Beach. At first, she refused to exit the vehicle or even tell the police her name. When she finally got out, it was pretty obvious she was wasted. She attacked one of the deputies, she could barely talk, and totally bombed the sobriety test. According to court documents, Patricia had a long and terrible history of violent outbursts and erratic behavior. She also had a DUI in 2020. Clearly, she has some issues. As for the incident on the Delta Airlines flight, it started when Patricia got out of her seat as the drink cart was rolling by. It was blocking her way, and the flight attendant asked her to sit in a vacant seat until the beverage service was over. Patricia's response was, "What am I, Rosa Parks?" And in response to that bizarre question, an older man on the flight said, quote, "You aren't black, this isn't Alabama, and this isn't a bus." This caused Patricia to have a full-blown attack of psychosis. She screamed at the man for not wearing a mask, even though he was eating and even though she didn't have a mask on either. She punched the senior citizen in his face. As soon as the plane landed, she was arrested and taken into custody by the FBI. Number 5. Plane drama. 27-year-old Dana Mustafa was on a flight from Frankfurt, Germany to Washington, D.C. 2 years ago when she began acting noticeably strange. It all started when she lit a cigarette in the plane's bathroom, causing the smoke detector to go off. Crew members told Mustafa that smoking wasn't allowed and told her to return to her seat. She started crying and told flight attendants that she had been in Germany to visit family and that they were all killed by a drunk driver. They noticed that she smelled very strongly of alcohol. A little while later, Mustafa headed towards the toilet again while flicking a lighter in her hand. She became combative when flight attendants tried to stop her from entering the bathroom. Federal air marshals intervened when she pushed one of the flight attendants away and tried slamming the door. Allegedly, she refused to comply, resisted being handcuffed, and even kicked one of the air marshals. Reportedly, after being subdued, Mustafa threatened to stab everyone on the plane and then commit suicide. She then wondered out loud, quote, "What's the point of living?" A half-empty bottle of vodka was found in her carry-on bag, and Mustafa was charged with assaulting a federal officer. She may have just had to deal with a lot of family drama, but she's now facing up to 8 years in prison if convicted for her plane fiasco. Number 4. The Mile High Fight Club. In summer of 2020, a fight broke out in the middle of a flight when 2 drunk British guys refused to wear their masks. The plane was traveling from Amsterdam to Ibiza. It was a serious brodown, with the 2 unruly British passengers, one of them not even wearing a shirt, got into a brawl with one of the other passengers. Even though the flight started out just between the 2 guys, eventually the whole plane got involved. It was pandemonium. The shirtless man got punched in the nose and started bleeding all over people. He ended up pinned down in the middle of the aisle while the rest of the passengers tried to defuse the chaos. Imagine a mosh pit on an airplane. It's not unusual to see vacation goers already drunk when they get on an airplane in preparation for their big vacation, and that's exactly what happened here. But unfortunately for the men who were on their way to Spain for some fun, the fun ended when they were arrested upon their arrival. Instead of enjoying their vacay, these guys were hauled off by Spanish cops, and all because they couldn't be bothered to wear their masks or put on their shirts. Number 3. Bad gas. A pilot was forced to make an emergency landing after a passenger refused to stop farting. The passenger wouldn't stop breaking wind on board a Transavia Airlines flight from Dubai to Amsterdam Schiphol. The 2 unfortunate Dutchmen sitting next to him didn't take very well to his flatulence, but the unashamed man was apparently not put off and refused to hold anything back. Members of the flight crew were apparently less than sympathetic and refused to do anything about it. Despite a warning from the pilot, a brawl between the men broke out, causing the flight to make an unscheduled early pit stop at Vienna Airport. Police boarded the plane with dogs and removed the 2 men after the pilot made a report about, quote, passengers on the rampage. 2 sisters that were sitting in the same row were also removed. The sisters claimed they had nothing to do with the fight. In a report, one of the sisters said, quote, "We had no idea who these boys were, we just had a bad luck to be in the same row and we didn't do anything. All I will say is that the crew were really provocative and stirred things up." All 4 passengers have since been released and were not arrested as they had not really broken any Austrian laws. However, they've all been banned from Transavia Airlines, who say that the 2 girls were indeed involved in the fight. Guess we'll never know. Number 2. Mask mandate. Like a lot of people, 23-year-old Adelaide Schroewang didn't agree with the coronavirus-related mask mandates, and in July of 2021 she was determined to exercise what she felt was her freedom and refused to wear a mask after boarding a Delta flight at Southwest Florida International Airport. Airline crew reported that Adelaide wouldn't stop arguing with the flight attendants despite their insistence, and when other passengers became involved, the young woman started spitting at them. 2 uniformed officers gave Adelaide one final chance to put her mask on, but instead of complying, she accused them of violating her human rights. She was then dragged off the plane and taken into custody. Throughout the ordeal, Adelaide could be heard repeatedly asking the men why they were putting their hands on her and what made them think they had the right to do so. She accused the so-called system of being threatening, but an unsympathetic officer simply replied, "That's the way it is." Adelaide's behavior constituted just one of more than 3,000 reported incidents of unruly passengers so far that year. Many of these individuals had issues with federally imposed COVID-19 restrictions, including a mask mandate. But the reality is that anyone who chose not to follow the policy would simply be removed from their flight. Schroewang was charged with resisting an officer, trespassing, and interference with aircraft operations. She reportedly continued to act combative as she was hauled off the plane and taken to jail. Number 1. Unstable. During a 3-hour flight over China in 2018, a mentally ill middle-aged man began behaving irrationally. A security officer on board noticed that the passenger, who was traveling alone, seemed unable to focus. He also had bloodstains on his clothing. The officer kept a close eye on the individual and saw he was getting more and more upset. Less than an hour before the plane was scheduled to land, the man demanded that the crew let him call his family. But since there was no phone signal on board, this wasn't possible. He started pacing back and forth in the cabin and shouting that the aircraft wasn't safe. A flight attendant later told the press that the passenger said he wanted to parachute off the plane. Things took a scary turn just minutes before the plane landed. Footage captured by a passenger showed the distressed man stomping on the floor, smashing a plane window with his phone, and trying to open the aircraft's emergency door. As the plane prepared to land, crew members struggled to get the man under control. One flight attendant was injured in the effort, but they managed to restrain him. When the plane landed, police immediately showed up to remove the unruly passenger. The airline speculated that he was mentally ill, but did not go into detail about the suspected nature of the man's illness. Thanks for watching. Would you rather confront a Karen on a plane or a snake? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time on The Bad Badger.